Let's get some facts. 37% of you aren't subscribed to this channel. That's almost 4 out of 10 just freeloading the alpha. So come on, hit subscribe and I promise to keep leveling up the show with the best guests and the juiciest insight. Go on, do it now.
Hi everyone, we're back again at Breakpoint 2025 in Abu Dhabi, and now we're joined by Ian Rogers, Chief Experience Officer at Ledger. Ian, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm great. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. You know, this conference, the energy is just so contagious. I'm just feeling all the bullishness in the air. You know, we're about almost a little over halfway through the first day. How's your experience been here so far?
I mean, they put on a great show. It's a Breakpoint. I felt this in Singapore last year. I was like, wow, this reminds me actually of going to E3, you know, the big video game conference in LA, in the late 90s. Like that's what it feels like. It feels like you know, to me, Breakpoint feels like it's the only conference in crypto that feels like a consumer centric event, you know, like, you know, it's actually, they understand, you know, marketing that feels, you know, consumer and culturally relevant.
Yeah. And then you see that kind of in the apps that, you know, people use on Solana. It just does feel very consumer focused. And like they really had that in mind when they were designing, you know, kind of a lot of the things that they're building. You know, I want to kind of talk to you big picture. You know, what are your expectations for crypto, you know, in 2026 and beyond? Or what would you like to see, you know, coming from crypto in the future? Well,
I mean, obviously this cycle has been, you know, so much different than the cycle we had 2021. You know, 2021, we had, you know, a lot of things that were very much about self-custody, you know, DeFi, NFTs. And this time has been very much about this convergence of TradFi and crypto. And I think in that way, you know, look, every industrial transformation comes with, kind of speculation, overinvestment, bubble, and then you get 30 years of sustained growth. And for me, we are very much in that 30 years of sustained growth, phase where, you know, things will look maybe a bit more boring in a way, you know, like what we're talking about yield on stablecoins. That's maybe a less exciting, you know, narrative than, you know, some of the to the moon, you know, narratives that we had throughout 2021, but that's also sustainable. You know, like these are things, you know, you can really see how you go. Like, for example, with Ledger Wallet, you can go easily from your bank account to your ledger. That's boring, but you can't take it for granted. You couldn't do that in 2021. In 2021, you know, when you tried to fund an account, you know, your credit card was going to get denied. Your bank was going to say, no, it's crypto. You know, now you can literally just set up a payee in your bank account, you know, do a transfer and boom, it lands in USDC or USDT in your ledger. Now, is that incredibly sexy? Well, you know, I don't know, but I think it is, you know, but it's also, it's very basic, but it works. So now the fact that you can easily transfer, you can easily get yield, whether that's on, you know, on your Solana by staking it or on, you know, your USDT through maybe some DeFi protocols, et cetera. And you can easily spend it on something like the Ledger, you know, credit card. You know, that is just a replacement for your bank and your traditional finance account, but it's actually, you know, it's global, it's fast, it's at the speed and the cost of crypto rails, not banking rails. You know, so I think you know, to me, this is where we are now. And another way to put it, to sum it up, might be, if you think about when Ledger was started 11 years ago, it was for one thing, this long-term risk asset called Bitcoin, right? You know, now today it's for every asset, from, you know, Bitcoin, Solana, tokenized stocks, you know, like every kind of investment that you might like to make. It's also, you know, a yield-bearing savings account, and it's also, you know, a spending account with something like the CL card attached to your ledger. So, you know, I think it's, you know, this is the case in crypto, right? It's like, unless the number's going up, we feel sad. Right. But really, when you look in the rearview mirror, we've accomplished so much. Like, we're in such a different place. than we were in 2021. And I think we need to, stop and appreciate it for a second.
That's such a great point to make. And boring isn't always a bad thing. And we're seeing that as, maybe things have gotten more boring. We're seeing that adoption really start to pick up and institutions get more interested, right? So I think that was important to say.
Look, we came into this to fix something, right? Mm-hmm. And so we shouldn't, when it works well, it will be boring, right? So I started doing digital music in the early 90s, and it was science fiction, literally. Now you can say, "Hey Siri, play the Beatles," and the Beatles come out of your phone. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of boring in a way, but for me, it's incredible. Like the idea that you might someday be able to do that when I started doing that stuff in the early 90s was just like, come on, man. Like, and no one would believe you if you told them the story. Now we take it for granted. So I think in some ways we should look forward to when, it's super easy to move money here to there and you're not thinking about what network it's on. Yeah. Like we should, it's easy to just tap and pay and you're not thinking about what the network on the other side of the terminal is. We just did a test in the Ledger booth over there where they bought a Ledger Nano Gen 5 using Zcash, and it was like scan, send, confirm, buy, and actually it was sending Zcash on ETH in this case, all like being, converted on the fly, landing in the other wallet. It just works, and that's an amazing place to be. We weren't there, 5 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I want to touch on that because you said, we tend to take these things for granted. And I think one thing that we do take for granted is security, right? We're so used to just putting our money in a bank, never really thinking about it, just maybe checking in on our app. But now with crypto, self-custody is a big thing, and we tend to take security for granted. And, now with this, AI is coming fast. Digital identity is becoming really important. How do you kind of think about digital identity in this AI era that we're experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think really people shouldn't take security for granted. There's unfortunately, and we're in that business of where we see people who take it for granted until they get wrecked, and then they suddenly go, "Oh wow," and they try to retrace their steps. I just encourage everyone to really think about it now and not later, because it is something that we actually inherently know. It's not like your bank account is super easy to use. Try to transfer me $50,000 right now from your bank account. It won't work, right? Why? Because they can't be sure that you are you. Right. If I want to raise the limit on my bank account in Europe, I have to go into the branch because there's nothing, no phone, no app, no website where they can be sure that I'm me unless I show up on their doorstep in person. Right. That's the security that we're used to. I mean, anyone of any age on this planet knows that passwords are a disaster. Right. So I would argue that everyone knows that security is kind of fundamentally borked, right? You know what I mean? You either have really bad password hygiene or you open 1Password or something like it 10 times a day. Like those are the only two. Most people just have bad password hygiene. But even if you have good password hygiene, it's not like it's easy to use. You know what I mean? And then you've got like 40 different one-time password, 2FA type of methods, Oh, for this one, am I using my text, which is super bad? Oh no, for this one, I'm using Google Authenticator. Like, come on. Like this is really reality. So at Ledger, this is what we exist to solve, not only for crypto, but broadly, because we have these incredible pieces of equipment, our computers, our telephones, but they were built to share stuff. They were not built to protect anything, right? So if you want to protect value, and that could be crypto, password, identity, you really need to have, something that was built for security. And that's what a Ledger device is. Now, to your point about AI, AI gives us digital abundance, right? Crypto gives us digital scarcity. AI gives us the ability to pretend anything, right? Pretend we know something. It's one thing AI is incredibly good at. Yeah. But also impersonating you, impersonating me, impersonating the way we look, the way we type, the way we talk, et cetera. And so, security becomes, more and more and more important. And I think it's not only security, it's also just retaining your identity. The right word is proof, right? Like what is a blockchain, but it's a method for proof of ownership, right? But you also need proof of identity, proof that my voice is coming out of this microphone and it wasn't, edited. I mean, when you're watching this, you don't know that it's me. You really don't. Ultimately we will need that proof. especially for, for important things. I mean, you're seeing these things in real life now, the fake, bridge that, in London last week that was, they faked that a bridge had collapsed and they stopped the trains, because of a fake image on the internet. You had, it was a political resignation. I can't remember this story that was, it took a while, or a few minutes at least, before, the word got out that they hadn't like pulled out of the race or whatever it was. You know what I mean? So proof, is crucial. And, there's no way to know from a phone, when an operating system can be so easily owned, unless you have a device that was built for security, you don't have security and you don't have proof.
Now, kind of transitioning on security, right? Because, the more people that we get, into crypto, the more obviously we need security becomes more and more of a topic. What do you think drives, adoption, for maybe that individual user?
Of a security device?
Yeah. Exactly. What makes them essentially, they come into crypto. I can't tell you how many people I know that don't even have hardware wallets.
Yeah.
And what do you think is that switch that makes them think I need a hardware?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, this is what worries me, right? Because I think the good news is that we are moving finance to crypto rails. The bad news is that we aren't caring enough about security as we're doing it. And so I think the hard thing is that, people just, it makes sense. People are not security experts. They're not cryptography experts. Like the average person isn't. So when, your phone, you're used to just turning to an app. There's an app for that, right? So you're used to turning to an app and you feel like, hey, the powers that be must be looking out for my security, right? But, I think that people just don't think all the way to, the Wall Street Journal did some great reporting a couple of years ago on people just losing their iCloud accounts and losing their lives, right? And then never getting them back. Maybe they only lost a couple $1,000s in a theft, but they lost all of their photos, right? Like that's priceless. So there's those kinds of things, which I think, open up people's eyes. And unfortunately too many people learn the hard way, but we always say with Ledger that, education is the path to Ledger. People get value, they get more educated. Not only do they care more about security, but they also care about self-custody, counterparty risk, these kinds of things. And that's how people generally find their way to Ledger. I think that, the challenge though is the ecosystems don't care enough. People are really focused on, how can I get people to get into their wallet with a thumbprint? I understand, you want as little friction as possible to people to enter the ecosystem, but that also means as little friction as possible for them to get wrecked. So if you don't have a secure screen, if you have a wallet that doesn't have a screen, you don't have security. You are sure more secure than, if the private key is just sitting in your phone. But, still, if your operating system is owned and someone can change the transaction under you at the point of your transaction, there's nothing you're going to do about it. Your phone screen, your computer screen, especially a browser wallet, these things will lie to you. They're built that way. It's not something you're going to get around. So I think it's really just education at the end of the day. And people do learn. We hate watching them learn the hard way. But it's got to be kind of an each one, teach one, sort of thing. And things will evolve over time. I mean, again, I'm old and I remember when the internet was actually not that interesting and not that easy to use. It was like, you didn't say, go to my website or download this app. You said hey, there's this thing called the internet. And if you get a computer and a modem and an ISP and a web browser, then you can download this ugly page really slowly as long as your roommate doesn't pick up the phone. Yeah. It feels like that's still kind of, we're just sort of starting to escape that era, and so I was describing earlier with Ledger, now that I can easily transfer into my Ledger. I can easily connect to pretty much any dApp. I can, so I think, some of that's on us. If you go back, to the summer of 2021 when, Ledger and MetaMask integration was broken, it wasn't good enough from a user experience standpoint. Today, I think we really are at that point where Ledger Wallet is good enough. The on-ramps are good enough. I can just tap my phone and pay with my Ledger, using the Ledger card. I can connect to any dApp I want to. I can, have any any token, any asset I want. I can, do anything I want to with it if I want to earn yield or anything like that. So now we're in that realm where it really is possible. So we need the education, and we need, kind of, like I said, each one teach one. Like everyone, friends don't let friends be insecure. Get educated, understand the facts. Educated people become Ledger customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you said that, because Ledger is literally at the forefront of security, right? I think everyone who thinks of, hardware wallets, they think of Ledger. Ledger is the first thing that comes to mind. I know it is for me and a lot of people. Now, and it's so interesting because when you guys first started, it was just Bitcoin, right? And then you've been rolling out so many new products. You talked about that user experience. So can you talk to us a little bit about like what that 2025 was like for you guys, and maybe what we can expect to see from you in 2026 and the future?
With pleasure. It's a great, thank you for the opportunity to share it, because it is like an exciting moment, and people probably, you see little bits and pieces of it, but you can't really feel it. I mean, so first of all, to your point about Ledger security, the great thing about my job is I'm not trying to sell like Coke instead of Pepsi. Like architecturally, Ledger is different. Ledger is better. And it's not that complicated. There's three things you need to be secure. One is you have to have a private key that is generated by and stored in the secure chip. When you do a cryptographic computation, it has to happen in that chip. So a lot of things, they either don't generate, they don't generate in the private, in the secure element. They generate maybe in what they call a general purpose MCU. It's like the chip that goes in your toaster or your remote control or something. But there are advantages to generating it in the secure element. Like it's got onboard entropy, these types of things. Same thing for when you're doing that cryptographic transaction. You're talking about a secure element, which is a chip that is literally constantly asking itself, like, am I being hit by a laser? Is someone really fucking with me right now? And like, so that's why that matters as well. But the third thing is you really need that secure screen. The screen on your phone is not secure. So if you're relying on your secure screen, if you're relying on your phone screen or your computer screen or your web browser to validate the transaction, then you could be fooled. So you really need to validate that on the secure screen. So that, that's what it means to be a signer. So one of the things we did this year is we stopped calling them wallets and we started calling them signers, which is what they are. When you say wallet, people think like, oh, my value's in that little device, and if I lose it, I'm screwed. But that's not the deal, right? What you have is your value is safe on the blockchain, and you have this little signer to sign a transaction. So you can say, I can prove I am the owner of that value, right? So that's, and we have an incredible, what we've done with our friend Tony Fadell is really, who invented the iPod and co-invented the iPhone, is we've evolved this signer roadmap from the little USB stick devices that everyone is familiar with to these touchscreen devices. Actually, I have a couple of them here in my pocket. The first one we did is this curved, e-ink screen, that we did with Tony. And then we also, this is Solana edition Ledger Flex. So these are, e-ink screen, really like rich display. So you can really see that what you see is what you sign. Now we've just launched another one. We built this one, but this curved e-ink screen, which is just incredible. It's the world's only organic TFT. This is silicon on glass. This is actually an organic substrate on plastic. The only of its kind. But it's expensive. It's a luxury device. It's, this is $399, comes with a case. This one is $249, made of metal. It's a 16 color screen. We really wanted to bring this form factor down to like the Nano X price point. So this year we launched the Ledger Nano Gen 5. We're selling them in the booth. I actually don't have one in my pocket. And that's sub $200 version of an e-ink touchscreen Ledger. So it's at $175 and it's an amazing device. So, but that's also like, man, we really have a lot of signers now. You can buy a Nano S Plus at Best Buy for $49. You can get the Gen 5 for $179. You can get the Stax at $249. You can get the Flex at $249. The Stax at $399. Like, you self-select as a customer. Which one do you want? They all come with the same security. So what we've been doing in the meantime, and what our focus really is making Ledger Wallet better and better and better. So, it supports more tokens than anything on the planet. There's no one. A lot of times people are like, "Oh, look at my awesome wallet." I'm like, "Oh, it'd be so nice to support 1, 2, or 3 tokens. That would be a really nice luxury." But no, we support everything. We really want you to be able to secure everything. Security is important, so it's important on every chain. We want you to be able to do everything that you want to do, with that. So, and really building that out. So, it's of course send, receive, buy. we work like a Skyscanner. So when you buy with Ledger, it's not like, here's the price. It's like, hey, we see where you are, what you're buying, how much you want to buy. And now these, 5 or more, partners have bid on your business, right? So I think we don't talk enough about this, to be honest. Like, this is where you can really get the best deal, just like going to Skyscanner or something for a plane ticket, going and buying inside of Ledger Live. I'm sorry, it used to be called Ledger Live. Now it's called Ledger Wallet, is the best way to do it. Same for swap. We have a whole bunch of different swap partners, CFI, DeFi, depends on the pairs. I want to swap this for this. Okay. And we go out and we find all the ways you can do that and then present you with the best price to do that swap. Also, cross-chain swaps, again, CFI, DeFi. Same thing for earning yield, doing that like, any way you want to do it. Also, you can connect your ledger to any dApp and, do whatever you want to, in the open web, and really like progressing on that roadmap. So, what to expect from us for the next year is just to continue doing that in Ledger Wallet, including the user experience. There's tons of things in the wallet user experience that, the Ledger Wallet team is so good. And, the only challenge we have is that, it would take them 3 years to do everything that they want to do right now. So, it's one of these like, how do we bring the future closer faster? We're constantly just, prioritizing, and trying to like bring this stuff better and allow people to do more, of what they want to do, and that's, I think, simply, look, Ledger used to be a device where you would buy and hold, and put it in the closet forever. Now it's something that you're actively using. Maybe that just means earning yield, but maybe that means trading. Maybe that means, managing identity. I have a ledger that I use just for 2FA as an example, so actually, here it is. So it's, there's no value in here, but there are passwords, so if I need to like log into Twitter or Google or whatever, like having a YubiKey sort of, sort of a use case. So really making sure that, you have security for whatever purpose you need. And that's the other misnomer about Ledger, right? People are like, oh my God, why would you carry your Ledger with you? It's like, well, I don't carry my investments around with me, of course, but why would you carry a YubiKey with you? Or why do you have Google Authenticator on your phone? Like, if you had an option to have a better one of those, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
And so, I think it, just like privacy needs to become normal, security needs to become normal.
Yeah, and I love how you went through like all that you guys are doing, all that you guys are thinking about building, because Ledger really, obviously it's security, but it's also a way like people can increasingly live their financial lives within Ledger. And I love that you guys are making that user experience more intuitive, because that's going to make security just an easier path to follow. So
I think the other thing that we're doing that I forgot to mention is we introduced Ledger Multi-Sig this fall. We've always had Ledger Enterprise, which is an incredible, if you're an organization who works with crypto, you need Ledger Enterprise. Like because not only do you need security, you need governance, right? So it can't be that like, your most trustworthy IT guy holds the private keys, right? If you're a business, like that's a disaster. You need governance. And that's what Ledger Enterprise offers. But Ledger Enterprise is very much an enterprise product, right? Mm-hmm. It's for banks. It's for governments. It's for exchanges. It's enterprise grade. Whereas Multi-Sig, is more of a small business solution, right? So, we saw these hacks this year, the Bybit hack, which is, 1.6 billion to North Korea, didn't need to happen. And so, Ledger Multi-Sig is really a, response to that, because you need ledger level security, clear signed. And we had a big gap, if you think about it, between like the retail customer and then, the enterprise customer. Right. And so now Ledger Multi-Sig fills that gap. So that's another important one that we did this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And this has been a fantastic conversation, and a very important one, and one that I, quite frankly, we touched on that people aren't thinking about enough, and as they need to be thinking about more. What is one thing you want people to take away from this conversation, and just about, securing your assets in general?
I would say just think hard about it. My OPSEC is not your OPSEC, operational security, right? Like no one can tell you how to do it. You have to think about your situation, but please do think about it. Think about worst case scenarios. No one likes to, like, no one, it's like, it's sort of like doing your your will or something, right? Like, no one wants to do it, but if you do it and do it well, you really are, protecting yourself, protecting your family. So, think about your security, think about your operational security. Think about like if somebody, wanted to, to get at you, how would they do it? You can guard against that.
Right.
So, it doesn't need to take, weeks of your time. You can spend a couple hours, thinking about this, setting things up correctly. It might be that multi-sig is right for you. It might be that you don't need that. It might be that you need, kind of like a mint wallet with, your 2FA, you're
right.
kind of walking around money. You're at the conference, you want to buy something, you've got that. And then you've got different operational security for your other stuff, for your longer term investments, your things that are staked long term, et cetera. So just think about it. What's right for you. That's my, my main message. Everyone should do it. Everyone should have a plan.
No, absolutely. And you mentioned all the different types of ledgers you have, and you went through the different price points, but quite frankly, it's priceless. Security is priceless. So you can't really,
there's no excuse. You can walk into a Best Buy and get a Nano S Plus for $50 and it has incredible security, right? So if you have more than $50 in value, like what are you doing?
Right.
Like, go get a ledger today. I'd recommend you at least get the Nano Gem 5 because you want that secure touchscreen. Also, we have another thing we released this year is the recovery key. It's an NFC card that's pin protected. So it's an electronic backup of your recovery phrase. So you can just touch it on the back of your touchscreen device and back up your recovery phrase, pin protected. Gives you, another bit of peace of mind around your self custody. So we're, really trying to make it as simple and as complete as it can possibly be. And, everyone should take advantage of what we've built.
Absolutely. And we'll be looking out for the next thing that Ledger builds and we'll be looking out for your announcements. Ian, thank you again for joining us.
Thanks for taking the time. Give me the opportunity.
So you obviously liked this video enough that you've got to the end. That's quite a big task. But listen, do me a favor, hit the like and subscribe button and also check out what video's next because I think you'll love it. But if you want even more, and when I'm talking more, I'm talking about member generated ideas, incredible alpha, research, everything there to help you in your journey, just head to realvision.com/join for the best financial intelligence out there and the pure alpha that's within the platform.